Subchapter 3.6. Rick and QR stood along the wall and watched the procession go by. They had entered the long and high-ceilinged corridor just as the acrobats passed, followed by a children's choir, staying in formation as they marched up the ramp to the stage, about 20 yards to Rick and QR's right. Residual illumination from massive spotlights over the stage cast a cool glow down the corridor, accompanied by upbeat, driving music, which seemed to be pulsating from the walls. But Rick's eyes were on the children's choir. He shook his head in contempt. Kids. They're using kids to sell people. This has been going on for centuries on Dukas, QR said. It's ingrained in their culture. Somebody needs to shut this place down. If you're thinking of going on a rampage, give me a head start to get out of here first. Rick nodded. This time he was quick not to lose himself. Okay, maybe tomorrow. A group of slaves numbering about 20 passed by. Rick saw the fear etched on their faces as house staffers prodded them along, but he held himself in check once again. He found himself scanning the faces of the 20 slaves as they passed, looking for Sarah. But no humans were among this ill-fated group. Okay, where do we go from here? He asked. Up that flight of stairs and through the door on the upper level. QR was careful not to point at the doorway high up across the corridor. Rick saw a break in the procession nearing them. Here's our chance, he said, before darting through the gap with QR close behind. A voice barked at them from up the ramp. Hey, you two! Though Rick and QR had heard the security guard and sensed him marching down the ramp toward them, they pressed on, ignoring the brutish figure. Hey! They had to stop. To keep up the charade would end up with an infuriated Dukisi guard sounding off the alarms. Are you talking to us? Rick showed his best frown, conveying his annoyance at being interrupted from his duties. Who are you guys? The guard raised his left forearm and consulted a device embedded in his gauntlet. IT. Rick knew he and QR were being scanned. When their faces popped up on his screen, the guard compared the images with the two men before him. IT, huh? You know you're not allowed to pass through here when a sale is on. We're taking a shortcut. Where to? Computer room. Which one? Rick hesitated, unaware there was more than one. QR sensed Rick's dilemma and jumped in. Center stage, level 5. Routine maintenance. The guard looked at QR and then back to Rick, judging them. He checked the employee records again, then gave them a toss of his head and said, Go on then. Don't cut through here again, or you'll get reported. Thanks, will do, Rick said. The guard watched Rick and QR walk off toward the staircase. He raised his gauntlet and tapped a button. Center 5 computer room, did you call for maintenance? A voice came back. No, we had that done yesterday, not scheduled for another week. You got 2 techs headed your way. Said it's routine maintenance. Who are they? Don't know, never seen them before, but they checked out on the network. Send me their IDs. Rick and QR stood against a pillar on a catwalk. The computer room they were looking for was 20 feet across from them, 50 feet above center stage, toward the rear. The appearance of several security guards at the entrance to the computer room prompted Rick and QR to pull back and hide behind the pillar. Below them, the pre-sale entertainment had ended, and the auction was well underway. Buyers in the stands held wands, which would send up a flash of colored light to indicate their bids. Sales would come alive in a lightning storm of colors, sizzling across the grandstands over the buyers' heads, then diminished and faded until the last winning bid remained. Though Rick could see the festive atmosphere in the stands, his attention was fixed on QR and his handheld. What's up now? Rick asked. It appears we have been... The expression on your planet is... ratted out. Yeah, that guard. He checked up on us. So far, they're not at full red alert. Just on watch. Rick considered alternate strategies. Let's see that floor plan again. QR brought up the floor plan on his handheld. He zoomed in on their location, across the space between the catwalk and the structure that held the computer room. Rick studied the plan, saw the right angle where the building turned, around the corner from the computer room, and then noticed the adjacent room. "What's that room?" he asked. "Glad you noticed. It's labeled as a maintenance room, a janitor's closet, I suppose." "That's way bigger than a janitor's closet. Whatever it is, it's right next to the computer room, and it's close enough." "Did you notice they pulled guards from there to cover the computer room? Why would anyone guard a janitor's closet?" "Let's go find out." "After you, boss." They kept to the shadows, skirted along the walls, and stopped behind pillars. When the guards' backs were turned, they dashed across a connecting bridge to the other side of the gap. Moments later, they arrived at the door to the maintenance room. QR had his handheld ready. A small control panel was beside the door, and a lit screen with Dukisi figures glowed before QR. "A secured door," QR said. "Password protected." "To a maintenance room?" QR held his device to the panel. "I guess the employees have been stealing the toilet paper." He tapped away, and the figures on the panel flashed in various patterns and sequences. "Passwords," QR muttered. "Amateurs." A moment later, a zigzag pattern of figures flashed green. The door clicked and opened. Lights inside the maintenance room faded up from darkness as Rick and QR entered. They wasted no time closing the door behind them and rushing to the far end of the room. A quick survey of their surroundings revealed several aisles of shelving full of boxes and cases, a typical storeroom. A counter cabinet rested against the wall on the far side, which was QR's target, the wall that separated this room from the computer room. He set his handheld on the counter and went to work. Rick turned his eyes to the room they had entered and counted himself lucky that no one was there. "Okay, there's our mark," QR said, referring to the computer next door. "Just give me a moment to get in." His fingers tapped away, burrowing his way into the auction house's brain. Rick saw some objects on a shelf nearby. He stared at them, wondering if he was seeing right. "Hey," Rick stepped over for a closer look. QR remained fixed on his work, not turning his eyes from his handheld. "What is it?" Rick stood at the shelf and stared. At least 50 high-powered rifles were neatly stacked on top of each other. "Guns." QR shot him a look over his shoulder, but had to return to his work. "Guns? Why would they be storing weapons in a maintenance room?" Rick picked up one of the rifles and studied its features. "Yeah. Weird, huh?" He thought for a second and looked at the case on the shelf next to the rifles, then lifted its lid and peered inside. Black objects resembling soup cans rested in neat rows in the case. Rick surmised there must be at least 100 of them. He picked up one can and studied it. Rick's eyebrows ticked up as he recognized the object. Bone shakers. This time, QR stopped his work and looked back over his shoulder. "What did you say?" "They got a case of bone shakers here." "What's a bone shaker?" "Something like a hand grenade. Activate it and throw, then run like hell. You don't want to be around when it goes off." Now, QR turned to face Rick. "You mean that's a whole case of munitions? Just sitting there on the shelf?" Rick reached over and pulled the lid off the next case. Ammunition. Rick went down to the case on the shelf below. Handguns. Rick lifted one of the guns and identified it. Spitters. Nasty. QR turned his eyes to the rows of aisles, the layers of shelves full of similar cases. "Rick, this is no maintenance room." "Yeah, no kidding. It's a munitions dump." QR jumped back to his handheld. "Okay, gotta finish this and get out of here." Rick looked at the cases around him. "How much longer?" "Files are transferring. About 80% done now. Give it another minute or two." Rick only had to give it a moment's thought. He went for his backpack and opened it. As the auction house's records poured into QR's device, Rick grabbed as many bone shakers as possible and stuffed them inside his pack. The Dukisi data clerk stood at his station in the computer room, reviewed the sales from last month, and then compared their overall progress for the year up to this month. Sales were off. Even after Nabu gets his tribute, he may still send an auditor from Mikos to uncover the reasons for their lagging performance. Not a comforting thought. The last time the Yellow Lantern was audited, 24 upper-level staff positions opened up. The previous holders of those posts mysteriously either resigned in disgrace or simply disappeared. Lost in that unsettling train of thought, the clerk nearly missed the flashing red icon at the edge of his screen. He tapped it and read the few lines of info that popped up. Unsure of what to do next, the clerk read the alert twice before calling his supervisor. The supervisor looked at it and concluded that this was a job for security. And they were in luck, as 2 security personnel had been assigned a post outside their door. They were called in and shown the anomaly.
"There has been a data breach,"
the guard said, who appeared to be in charge. "Someone is accessing the records. Why didn't you notify us sooner?"
"Okay, got it."
QR tapped his handheld and pocketed the device, satisfied he had gotten all he needed. He turned to Rick, expecting him to be heading for the door. Rick was stuffing his pockets with foggers, small but highly effective smoke screening devices. But these particular types were smart foggers, able to scatter infrared signatures within their cloaks. QR marched for the door. "No time for that, Rick. We can't stick around." "Right behind you." Rick followed QR, but another object standing upright against the wall caught his eye.
"Ooh, a grenade launcher."
Rick swiped up the weapon as he passed and slung it over his shoulder, adding it to the other dozen or so rifles that hung from his upper body. His pockets bulged with potential mayhem. As she walked back to the stadium, Catherine thought about reapplying the black makeup to her face that she had rubbed off, but she left the small container in her pocket, a part of her disguise that she now deemed unessential. The receivers in the back of her head were alive with communication transmissions from within the stadium, but for the most part, she ignored them. She returned to her spot at the rail overlooking the lower levels and the stage below. The pre-sale entertainment had ended, and an auction was currently buzzing with a flurry of colored, flashing bids for a pair of alien slaves, a young mother and her daughter, to be sold together in the same lot, ensuring a bidding frenzy. But Catherine's mind was not on the sale. All the activity around her was unimportant to her. The Priority 1 program continued to eat at her, wrapping its fingers around her core processors and tattooing its will onto hers. She stared at the crowd, hating herself for missing an opportunity to break free when it had presented itself back on the Apache. Catherine recalled the time back on Earth when she faced off with Hard Lard and what the crime boss had said to her. "You gotta do what I tell ya. Now take your clothes off." She recalled how easily she responded, how quick she was. "No, ma'am, I will not." Catherine stared at the flashing rainbow colors over the heads of the spectators and bidders, not paying attention, quite lost in her memories. But she was sure of one thing. She was no longer the same android that had confronted Hard Lard. If she was not that android, what was she? The answer rose to the surface and coalesced into the image of Beverly, the stolen android cleaning lady who had been reduced to a gutted torso and head. Where is home? Where is home? That's it, Catherine thought. She was Beverly. She was a cleaning lady waiting for her insides to be ripped out and sold piecemeal. Agent Soto approached Catherine from behind. "Catherine, what's up?" Catherine glanced back at Soto, not fully acknowledging him, then returned her gaze to the crowd. "Agent Soto, why are you not with your team?" "You came back from the ship, but you didn't radio back in. What's going on?" Catherine had a rush of thoughts about how to answer that question. She watched the show a bit longer and felt a need to say something. But what she said was more to herself than to Soto. She kept her voice low. "There was a time, James, that I used to tell people no." "Excuse me?" And I was proud of it. I thought it made me different from other androids. Soto came around to Catherine's side. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. With Soto so close, Catherine snapped out of her regret-induced melancholy and reawakened the IPS special agent within her. Her voice hardened. McCabe and QR are no longer at the auction. They have no reason to be here. Concentrate our forces on the hangars and launch pads. Soto nodded. Right. Catherine pushed by him and marched away from the stands with Soto close behind. Catherine used her internal transmitter to send a message to the other teams. Team 1, proceed to launch pads to the east. Team 2, proceed to hangars on the south side. Both teams set up patrols in your areas. The replies to her transmissions were quick. Team 1, copy. Heading to east side launch pads. Team 2, copy. Heading south to the hangars. Catherine strode through the mass of Dukisi and other aliens that swirled around them, heading for the exit. Soto jogged to keep up. Agent Soto, I will join you with Team 3. Regroup outside the main entrance, then proceed to the hillside hangars to the west and set up surveillance there. Got it. I have a strong suspicion that McCabe's sundog is hidden there. That's the easiest place to hide a ship of that size. You're the boss. I'm just a cleaning lady. This time, Soto heard Catherine. She had spoken clearly and with confidence. She wanted to be heard. But what that statement meant left Soto in the dark. He gave Catherine a puzzled look, expecting his partner to explain, but got no more. Catherine walked on, fully aware that he had heard her, but she did not care. She hoped Soto would read her body language, her sharp, clipped steps, and the edge to her voice. If he asked her to repeat herself, she would be happy to do so. Just a cleaning lady.